In a year filled with global conflict and ChatGPT, it can be easy to let great music slip through the cracks. Luckily for you, I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. This is my 2023 year in review.
Many people will ask why a Woodwind album.
I ask myself why anything. Like why why did we record these albums before in my career? Like it's just kind of those are the things that came. I would say it's probably this felt more real and authentic to me. Like, cause I don't stop trying things. Like I always try, recordings and I try vocal things. I even try to jot down ideas and lyrics here and there, but none of that excited me. It kind of felt like I'm trying to do a thing. You know what I mean? And I don't like when I'm trying to do a thing. It just felt inauthentic. And this felt like the realest I could be at the time.
This video is going to follow a top 10 format, but not in the traditional top 10 albums. It's more so the 10 things that stuck out to me most about music this year. Most of today's hits are low quality. Music, like anything else, it has its ups and downs. And there were the highs of the 60s and the 70s when the biggest commercial hits were songs from the Beatles and Stevie Wonder and Jimi Hendrix and these artists who were pushing boundaries of music and had something to say. And you just don't see too much of that anymore. When you look at the top 10 albums streamed on Spotify or the top 10 songs, a lot of them are watered down, auto-tuned. They feel like these shitty Marvel movies that keep coming out. It's just like who's watching these? How are they still making money? And why is this the number one movie in the world? That's how I feel about a lot of these songs. Like the big Miley Cyrus song from this year, is not good in my opinion. And two of the most streamed albums this year are re-recorded Taylor Swift albums. And I love that she was able to get control of her masters again. And I think all of that is great. But the fact that music that has already been released is the biggest in the world and launching this huge global tour, it just shows that labels in the music industry are getting pretty lazy and we're letting it happen. We are okay with that. We are okay with these songs that are 2 minutes long and with no substance because we can put them into videos and such. I think today it's really tough to find good quality hits that everyone's listening to. The Estate Sale by Tyler the Creator is probably the best deluxe version of an album that I've heard. Most deluxe albums are just trying to get a quick streaming cash in and like sort of ride the wave of the hype of the last one, put out a couple of the B-side tracks that don't really add much to it. The Estate Sale that's not the case. We have some absolute gems on this deluxe album from Tyler, and it just shows his ability to pump out incredible music. And he is one of those big artists who can hit the charts, but also make quality. And that's something that we're lacking. And I hope people can see what Tyler is doing and bring quality music back to the mainstream. But I'm not going to touch too much on the Estate Sale because I already did a whole video on it. I'll link it down below just about Tyler the Creator in general. And I touch on that album quite a bit. We're starting to have a bit of a jazz resurgence. And I don't think jazz has ever been the biggest thing in the world. And most people hate it because it's weird and doesn't make sense. And all of that is true. It's a strange thing to listen to for fun. But now there's a couple of artists who are really making what can only be considered jazz and gaining massive audiences in the process. You look at someone like Leve, she is really pushing the envelope and bringing a lot of people into the world of jazz. She tours the world just like performing with full orchestras. Like that's what her shows are. And I think it's amazing. She's not sacrificing on what she loves, which is jazz music, in the name of getting as many people to listen to her as possible. You know, you see a lot of these artists who start out in more niche genres. Once they start to get a little bit of traction, their team pushes them to like, hey, let's bring in some more songwriters and let's kind of get a more of a pop influence here and try to get some songs that people will listen to. And I think a lot of artists in that process lose who they are and why they started doing this. On the other hand, you see an artist like Yusuf Days, who's still in much more of a niche and small market at the moment, but he's becoming one of the most sought after drummers in the world, period. And he has his own projects as well, like Black Classical Music and the Yusuf Days Experience, which I highly suggest everyone watch. It's just great energy, 30 minutes of just live music in Malibu, sunset. It's great. But he's sort of bringing these jazz elements into other people's productions. And we're starting to see drums become more intricate on hit records from time to time. And a lot of that is this sort of jazz influence starting to make its way back. Daniel Caesar's album, Never Enough, is a simple yet brilliant performance across the board. I watched Anthony Fantano's review of this album and he gave it a light 6, which I think is insane. You know, his complaints that it felt unfinished or, you know, the beats didn't feel fleshed out. It's intentional. Daniel Caesar doesn't need some unbelievable production behind him. He doesn't need these fully polished songs that are written to a T and succinct and to the point. His power is in riffing and these this vocal range where I mean it's unbelievable the levels that he goes on this project, and I loved it. There's not a single song on Never Enough that I didn't enjoy, and there's some songs on there like Ocho Rios, Cool, and Do You Like Me that they take my breath away when I listen to them. I think today everyone makes things complicated when they don't have to be. He has a brilliant voice and he just needs beats and music that sets the stage for that. It doesn't have to be crazy and fleshed out. I think it almost adds to the character of the record. And it was a great, great album. You should all check it out if you haven't. As dance music becomes more and more prevalent in the broader scope of the music industry, you see two sides of the coin. You see the very commercial friendly cookie cutter stuff that is bringing it to a bigger audience, and I think is still very important. But what I'm most excited about is the other side of that coin. This is the more smaller niche artists that are coming up and I think really pushing the boundaries of what electronic music can be. And one of those artists is Nia Archives. Her EP titled Sunrise Bang Your Head Against the Wall is one of my favorite projects of the year. It's just this blend of hip hop, R&B, electronic sort of breaks, and even some like more alternative and folk type moments as well. It's an electronic project that is what I think electronic music should be. It should be just taking these different genres and blending them together and creating something that people haven't heard before. And that's what Nia Archives did. It has some of my favorite songs of the year on there, and I'm just so excited to see what she does, especially with this just being an EP. I'm assuming that there will be an album on the way at some point, and I hope, you know, she just keeps pushing and pushing forward and gaining an even bigger audience. Another artist I want to highlight in this space is someone I've been a fan of for a long time, and I think with his last project has just gone to a completely different world, and that's Medicine. His album Always in a Hurry, from top to bottom, just feels like a strange jazz electronic fused world that you go to. You listen to the album, you're in it, and then you're out. It just doesn't feel like anything I've ever heard before, and it's not very vocal heavy, so I don't think it did well commercially, but I highly suggest anyone who is, interested in electronic music, um, to check it out because I think it slipped through the cracks and it's fucking amazing. It's so good. My favorite sort of surprise record this year was Electric Dusk by Leon Thomas. You all may know him as this guy from the Nickelodeon show Victorious, but I now know him as someone who makes incredible music. And this project that he did, I hope is just a stepping stone for what could be sheer greatness. You can hear in the production that he definitely has resources, but he's not working with a lot. There's flaws, there's imperfections, there's moments where the mix isn't super clear. But the deeper I get into music production in my own world, the more I'm okay with that because what he's doing is just very unique. He's bringing elements of Frank Ocean's type of vocal pitching, catchy hooks. He's got features from Benny the Butcher and Ty Dolla Sign, and it just has the whole project has this vintage feel to it, and it just feels powerful, even though he's relatively a smaller artist, I would say at this point. And I hope that changes, and I hope that he's able to garner a bigger audience and more people get put onto him. This year, more than ever, I spent time going back and listening to the greats. So you have the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Wonder, Prince. I There's so much of these catalogs that I haven't explored until just this year, and a lot of it was me trying to pursue a career in music production and as an artist, I felt I was doing myself a disservice by just glossing over this era of music that shaped so much of what we do today. I really was looking into them and trying to figure out why that was the case. And I think a lot of it just comes from them having to do more with less. The technology now compared to what it was then is unimaginable. Like the amount of resources we have now compared to the 60s and the 70s when this music was coming out is astonishing to think about when you hear a Beatles album. There's power in their imperfections and the moments where they're missing notes here and there or they're off key by a little bit. They didn't have the ability to tune it in. So they had to just keep doing takes until they got the best one, and even the best one wasn't going to be perfect. Whereas today, most music that you're going to listen to is a culmination of the best parts of like 40 different takes all sort of comped together to make this perfect vocal line that then goes through a software called Melodyne that tunes it by hand and then goes into autotune as well. This is like a standard practice for all of music. I think somewhere along this line we lose the soul and the integrity of a great musician. And I think that's where the big disconnect is when you listen to older stuff versus new, and how it has that vintage sound that people are going after. Like you have people who are moving backwards or adding effects to something that's really clean to make it sound dirty and vintage because these older records have so much appeal and soul to them that we're missing today on a lot of fronts. And so I'm so glad and I can't wait to see what I listen to next year as I just keep listening to more and more stuff from the past that has kind of shaped where we are today and learning from it and really studying what makes that music so great and timeless. I'm talking all this shit about music today being perfect and not having soul or character, but that's not the case with everybody. And that's definitely not the case with an artist named King Cruel. and his album Space Heavy that he released this past year. This was my second favorite project of the year, and it's for a lot of the reasons that I described earlier. It's so raw. His performance is subtle yet powerful. It's just, it feels like you're sitting on like a train driving on the coast of England and it's raining 40 degrees and it's just some British fellas in a room like just playing music, and you've never heard this music before and it's amazing. I feel like there's a location to this album and I love when that's the case. Like I feel like I know where this album is supposed to take me, and it's a completely unique project. It's so depressing but also makes me feel comforted in a weird way. It makes me feel good about the trajectory that we're headed. The fact that people are still making albums like this album is not a song is going to be in the top 100 of the year, but King Cruel will sell out shows. And there's a lot of artists that are on the top 100 with shallow music that can't do that. And you just see a lot of the great music coming out right now. They're just creating these really niche and dedicated fan bases, and King Cruel is one of them. And it's for a reason, because of projects like this. Space Heavy is a triumph. It's, it's completely unique and singular to his voice, and nobody else could have made this album. I loved it. It's my second favorite album of the year, Space Heavy by King Cruel. Please go listen to it and support the great music that's still out there. Sometime around January or February of this year, I started to go on a deep dive of the Alchemist catalog. And I think what he's doing in the world of hip hop is not being talked about enough. And he's one of the most underappreciated figures in all of music, in my opinion. Doing albums with Earl Sweatshirt, Freddie Gibbs, West Side Gun and Griselda, Larry June, just some of these big figures in hip hop are all flocking to the Alchemist and this sound that he has. And that sound, it has different names. Some people call it abstract or underground or alternative hip hop, but it's this wave of hip hop and rap music that I fell in love with. And some of the more niche names that I discovered this year are Mike, Billy Woods, Navy Blue, Boldy James, and these projects that they put out this year at such a high level of consistency, I don't think you see very often from a lot of other artists in a lot of different genres. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what comes out of this space in the next few years. And it was really the biggest discovery in terms of genre that I had all year, and I just really I fell into it. And so that's why it comes in at my number 2 slot of the year. There was only ever going to be one project at my number 1 spot. And when I started writing this video, it was the first thing I put down, and it might just be my favorite album of the past 5 years. That project is Lahai by Sampha. I don't know if it's because I spend every day working on music that I gained such a deep appreciation of this and just love of this album and its intricacies and its intention. Like, that's the biggest word that comes to mind when I think about this album, is every single piece of it was done with intention and time. It doesn't feel rushed. It feels everything is where it's supposed to be. Everything is how it's supposed to be. And it's stunning to listen to. I know how hard it is to do what Sampha just did. And I think there's a big reason why it took him 6 years from his first album process to this one. We don't see artists go away for long periods of time and come back with albums that are this fucking good. Most of the time they go away, they kind of lose themselves, blah, blah, blah. But Sampha was gone, and then he came back with this project that has changed how I approach music across the board. This album is on a pedestal with very few others as my favorites of my lifetime. It's unbelievable. It inspires me every day. It is number one album of the year, moment of the year, project of the year. You know, please go listen to it and support music like this because it's so important that artists like Sampha have the resources to keep creating these types of projects. It's art, and we can lose that along the way if we're not too careful.